It was supposed to be a day filled with laughter, music, and love. The kind of day that brings families closer. A wedding celebration that promised new beginnings. Among the crowd was Shelton Sanders, dressed sharply, smiling easily, the kind of man who made everyone around him feel safe. When his cousin tossed the bouquet, it landed right in Shelton's hands. The guests cheered, a symbol of good luck, everyone said. Shelton laughed, spinning his little sister Wilveria across the dance floor. She was only 15 years younger, but to her Shelton was more than a brother. He was a protector, a mentor, and a second father.
Call me and let me know what's going on, and I've never had to wonder whether he's telling me the truth or...
That night, he told her playfully, "You better grow up and have 8 kids someday." It was a moment she would never forget. The warmth in his voice, the safety in his embrace, but within days, that laughter would turn into silence. Because soon after that wedding, Shelton never came home again. Born on August 31st, 1975 in Rembert, South Carolina, Shelton's life was rooted in faith, family, and service. He joined the Boy Scouts at just 9 years old, learning leadership and compassion early on. Later, he became part of the Knights of Pythagoras, a group dedicated to shaping young men into community leaders. At Hillcrest High School, Shelton played snare drum in the marching band and joined the junior varsity football team. Teachers described him as focused and kind. Classmates said he was the one you could count on. When he graduated, Shelton enrolled at the University of South Carolina, majoring in administrative information management. He excelled academically and socially, even winning awards for leadership. His friends from high school followed him to college, and together they built a tight-knit circle of loyalty and trust. But in 1996, tragedy nearly struck. While burning leaves in his yard, a gust of wind caught fire to his clothes. Shelton suffered third-degree burns over much of his body. It took him a year and a half to recover, but he came back stronger. By 1999, he was finishing his degree and had earned a job at the USC School of Medicine as a systems manager in the Department of Neuropsychiatry. Everyone saw a bright future ahead, a young man with a solid career, deep faith, and endless potential. Then came June 19, 2001. Shelton had been helping a friend prepare for an upcoming bachelor party. That night he drove out to Columbia, South Carolina, to book hotel rooms at an Embassy Suites. A quick errand, nothing unusual. He called his mother and brother to say he'd be home in 2 hours. But 2 hours turned into an endless night. At midnight, his father woke from a nightmare, hearing gunshots and his son screaming for help. When Shelton's car still wasn't in the driveway, he went out searching. He searched through the night, and every night after, Shelton never came home. His car was later found, but his body never was. His disappearance has haunted the Sanders family for nearly 25 years. When the sun rose the next morning, the Sanders family already knew something was wrong. Shelton had never stayed out all night without calling. He was responsible, careful, and deeply connected to his parents. His mother, Mrs. Sanders, sat by the window, waiting for headlights that never came. His father, William Sanders, retraced every road leading out of Columbia, highways, back roads, parking lots, calling his son's name into the dawn. As hours turned into days, panic set in. Shelton's job, friends, and even his professors all said the same thing. He wasn't the type to vanish. Within days, the Columbia Police Department began investigating his disappearance. Flyers went up, search parties formed, and volunteers combed wooded areas near the hotel and surrounding neighborhoods. Every lead seemed promising at first, but each one led to the same place: nowhere. Then, a small detail caught investigators' attention. The last person seen with Shelton that night was one of his college friends, the same friend who had unexpectedly shown up to help him book hotel rooms. According to phone records and witness statements, Shelton had been with this man for several hours on the night of June 19, 2001. They were supposed to drive together to finalize bachelor party plans, but only one of them came back. That same friend reportedly told Shelton's family that he dropped him off near his home around 11:30 p.m., but Shelton's father's nightmare at the sound of gunshots began around midnight. Detectives questioned the friend multiple times. His answers were vague, inconsistent. Yet without physical evidence or a body, the case stalled. There was no crime scene, no weapon, no proof. Months turned into years, and still no sign of Shelton. But the Sanders family refused to let his memory fade. William Sanders, a quiet, dignified man, spent his evenings driving the same roads his son once traveled, convinced he could still find something others had missed. He barely slept. His wife prayed through the night, and little Wilveria, just 11 years old, could hear the faint sobs of her mother behind closed doors. For years, the case sat cold. But in 2008, there was finally movement. After 7 long years, an arrest was made. The same college friend, the last person seen with Shelton, was charged in connection with his murder. For the Sanders family, it was a bittersweet moment, hope mixed with heartbreak. Finally, someone was being held accountable. Maybe now they'd get answers. In the courtroom, the suspect sat quietly, showing little emotion. The prosecution argued that he had motive, opportunity, and knowledge of details only the killer could know. But the defense painted a different picture, a loyal friend being unfairly accused because he was the last to see Shelton alive. The jury deliberated for days. But when the verdict came, it wasn't closure, it was confusion, a mistrial. The jury couldn't agree there would be no conviction, no second trial. And once again, Shelton's family was left with nothing but grief and unanswered questions. For Wilveria, who was finally old enough to understand the full truth, the pain cut deep. She said later, "That was the first time I realized how broken our system could be." Her father continued to search, long after the courtrooms emptied and the cameras disappeared. Sometimes he'd come home at 2 a.m., his eyes heavy, hands trembling, still believing he'd one day find his son. Everywhere they looked, there were reminders. The church Shelton attended, the yard where he burned leaves, the drumsticks he left in his old room. The hardest part wasn't the not knowing, it was the stillness. The silence where answers should have been. And though the trial ended, the Sanders family's fight for truth had only just begun. After the mistrial, the Sanders family returned home to a house that felt emptier than ever. The courthouse had gone silent. Reporters stopped calling. Even neighbors once eager to help stopped asking questions. For most people, it was just another unsolved case. But for the Sanders family, time had frozen on June 19, 2001. For William Sanders, every day began and ended the same way: driving. He'd get off work, grab a flashlight, and head down the lonely back roads outside Columbia, following the same routes his son might have taken. He searched through fields, ditches, abandoned buildings, and old bridges. Sometimes he'd come home after midnight, exhausted and defeated. But he never stopped. He couldn't. Shelton's mother, meanwhile, spent her nights at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair her son used to fill. She prayed for him every night, not for justice, not even for answers, but simply for peace. She would whisper his name before bed, as if saying it enough times would bring him home. And then there was Wilveria, the youngest of the Sanders siblings, still just a child when her brother vanished. At 11 years old, she didn't fully understand death, only absence. She knew her parents were grieving, but she also knew something inside their family had changed forever. Her father became quieter, her mother distant. Laughter rarely filled their home anymore. At school, when other children talked about their brothers or sisters, Wilveria stayed silent. She carried her grief like a secret, something too heavy to share. The only thing that brought her comfort were the memories, her brother teaching her to cook, to defend herself, to dream. In her heart, Shelton wasn't gone. He was waiting to be found. Years passed, but the case went cold. Detectives were reassigned, files gathered dust, and phone numbers of key witnesses changed. It felt as if the system had moved on, but the Sanders family couldn't. Then came the harshest blow of all. As the years went by, Shelton's father began to lose hope. One evening, while sitting on the porch, he told Wilveria softly, "We've lost my Shelton." It was the first time she'd ever heard her father sound defeated. Those words broke her heart. But even as her father's strength began to fade, Wilveria made a silent promise that she would never stop searching. As she grew older, that promise became her purpose. When she turned 18, she began helping with community events for missing persons. She joined walks for awareness, spoke to reporters, and even visited investigators to ask about her brother's file. Most days, they had little to tell her, but she kept showing up. Social media would eventually become her biggest ally. By the late 2010s, she began posting photos of Shelton online, smiling, vibrant, full of life, alongside updates on the case. "Please share," she would write. "Someone knows something." And slowly, people began to notice. Old friends reached out. Local news stations picked up the story again. And every time she saw her brother's face shared by strangers online, it felt like a small victory, a sign that his story still mattered. Her father, older now and tired, would sometimes sit beside her and scroll through the posts on her phone. He'd smile faintly and say, "Maybe this time someone will remember." For 2 decades, that hope kept the Sanders family alive. They never got the closure they deserved, but they never gave up either. Even now, more than 24 years later, Wilveria continues to meet with investigators every 2 months. She knows the odds are slim. She knows her brother may never come home. But she also knows that the moment she stops fighting, his story truly ends. And that's something she'll never allow. In her own words, "We've lived half our lives searching for him. Until the day we find him, or the truth, that's what we'll keep doing." The cold case of Shelton Sanders may have gone quiet for the world, but in his family's hearts, the fire still burns. Hours turned into days and hope began to fade. Samantha's family plastered her photo across every telephone pole, grocery store board, and social media feed. Her mother, Linda, refused to sleep, combing through every alley and roadside with trembling hands clutching a flashlight. Then, on the 3rd day, a call came through. A hiker in the nearby Pine Creek woods had found something, a piece of torn fabric caught on a tree branch. It was the same blue jacket Samantha was last seen wearing. Police rushed to the site. The woods were eerily silent, save for the crunch of boots on dry leaves. About half a mile in, a deputy spotted a shallow ditch. Lying partially covered by dirt and branches was Samantha's body. Her wrists were bound, her face bruised. The brutality was shocking. This wasn't a random act. Investigators immediately sealed off the area. Evidence markers dotted the ground. Tire tracks, a broken phone, cigarette butts. The medical examiner later confirmed Samantha had been assaulted before her death. Time of death within 12 hours of her disappearance. Detectives turned to the people closest to her. Friends were questioned again, but their alibis held. Then suspicion turned toward someone new. Her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Jake Turner. He'd been quiet since she vanished, claiming he didn't want to get in the way. But police soon discovered Jake's truck had been seen near Pine Creek the night Samantha went missing. And when forensic teams analyzed the dirt from his tires, they matched the soil from the crime scene. When confronted, Jake's calm cracked. He admitted they had argued that night. Samantha wanted to end things for good. He claimed she got out of the truck in anger and walked off, and that was the last time he saw her. But his story didn't align with phone records showing he stayed in the area for nearly an hour after she disappeared. For Samantha's family, the discovery was unbearable. The reality set in. Their daughter, who'd been full of dreams and light, was gone because of someone she trusted. But for detectives, this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of unraveling what really happened in the dark stretch of Pine Creek, and why Samantha never made it home that night. After Jake Turner's story began to fall apart, detectives dug deeper into his life, and what they found painted a chilling picture. Jake and Samantha had been together for nearly 2 years, but their relationship was far from perfect. Friends described constant arguments, jealousy, and controlling behavior from Jake. Samantha had confided to her best friend that she was thinking of leaving him for good. She just didn't know how he'd react. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Jake's messages to her turned darker. Texts recovered from Samantha's phone revealed threats disguised as desperate pleas. "You can't just leave me. Sam, you're everything I have. If I can't have you, no one will." Detectives also recovered footage from a nearby gas station camera showing Jake's truck driving toward Pine Creek just before midnight, exactly when Samantha's phone last pinged in that area. On his return, the truck's headlights flickered erratically, as if he'd been driving through rough terrain. The final piece came when forensic teams tested the rope used to bind Samantha. The fibers matched a roll found in Jake's garage. It was the same kind used for his job as a construction worker. When confronted with the evidence, Jake initially denied everything. But after hours of questioning, his composure broke. Through tears and anger, he confessed. He said it wasn't supposed to happen, that he just wanted to scare her into staying. According to Jake, their argument in the car got heated. Samantha tried to leave and he grabbed her arm. Things escalated. She screamed, fought back, and in the struggle he pushed her too hard. When she hit her head on the dashboard and stopped moving, he panicked. Instead of calling for help, he drove her into the woods, terrified of what would happen next. He buried her shallowly near the creek, telling himself he'd come back, but he never did. In court, Jake's tears couldn't save him. The jury found him guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 35 years to life in prison. For Samantha's family, justice brought some closure, but the wound would never fully heal. Linda, her mother, later said in an interview, "I'll never understand how someone who claimed to love her could do this. All I can hope is that her story saves another girl from trusting the wrong person." Samantha's friends now organize an annual candlelight vigil in her memory, right by the trail where she was found. Each year, hundreds gather with candles in hand, whispering her name under the stars. Because though Samantha's voice was silenced, her story still speaks, reminding everyone that love should never hurt, and that sometimes, the people closest to us can hide the darkest truths. Years have passed since that night, the night Samantha Reed's laughter was stolen from the world. But her memory didn't fade into silence. Instead, it grew into a movement that continues to save lives. After Jake Turner's conviction, Samantha's family refused to let her name become just another file in a police archive. Her mother, Linda, launched the Speak for Sam Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping victims of relationship abuse and raising awareness about warning signs of coercive control. The kind Samantha endured quietly for months. The foundation partners with schools, universities, and local shelters, offering workshops and crisis hotlines for young women. On its website, there's a section titled Letters for Sam, where survivors from around the country share their stories. Many credit Samantha's story for giving them the courage to leave dangerous relationships. Wilvaria, the little sister who once danced with her big brother, Shelton in the earlier story, even reached out to Linda years later. She told her how both of their families had lost someone they loved deeply, and how their pain had led to purpose. The two women met, cried together, and promised to keep fighting, not just for justice, but for awareness. Samantha's father, Robert Reed, rarely speaks publicly, but at the first memorial walk held in his daughter's name, he finally took the microphone. His voice cracked as he said, "My daughter's light didn't go out that night." It was passed on to every woman who finds the strength to walk away, to every friend who decides to speak up, to every life saved because someone saw the signs and chose to act. Today, that hiking trail where Samantha was found has been renamed Reed's Path of Hope. Along the trail, there are small plaques engraved with her favorite quotes. The last one reads, "You can't control what happens to you, but you can control what you become because of it." Every year on the anniversary of her disappearance, people from across the state gather to walk the trail, candles in hand, whispering prayers and stories. The event isn't one of sorrow, it's one of strength, because Samantha's story, though born in tragedy, became a message of resilience. It reminds us all to look out for the quiet warnings, to check on our loved ones, and to never ignore our instincts when something feels wrong. Her legacy isn't about how she died, it's about what her story continues to teach the world. In loving memory of Samantha Reed, may her light forever guide others to safety.